You probably think you're in complete control of your decisions and thoughts, but how often are they guided by something else? Something you don't even notice occurring deep within your mind. Here are 21 cognitive mind traps, fallacies, biases, and other phenomenon that exists within your brain. Strange things that are hardwired into all human minds. You may go through your entire life or well into adulthood completely unaware that you're carrying around these thinking errors and mental shortcuts that influence your day-to-day thinking. You can't turn them off or delete them from your brain, but being one of the few people that can notice when they arise in your mind and knowing the situations they're likely to act upon your decision-making is one of the first steps to becoming a more thoughtful and rational thinker. This two-part series is mainly inspired by the works of Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman and his amazing book, Thinking Fast and Slow. Survivorship bias. During World War II, Navy researchers conducted a study on the damage done to aircraft by enemy fire that had returned from missions. They concluded and recommended that armor needed to be added to these areas with the most damage. At first, this seems like the most reasonable course of action. We need to place more armor where the planes are getting hit the most. However, a mathematician by the name of Abraham Wald was quick to point out an error the researchers had made. They were researching data only from the planes that had survived their missions, and the bombers that had been shot down were not included at all. Wald proposed they change their initial decision and do the opposite. Armor the areas where the surviving planes had not been hit, as these were in fact the areas that were causing fatal damage to the other bomber planes that had not survived. Survivorship bias is a logical error where the data that we are presented with is representative of only a subset of the population that has already survived some kind of filtering process. More simply, we tend to focus on the things that survived the process and overlook ones that failed. People may say things like they made much stronger and more beautiful buildings in this time and age, ignoring that this is one of the only buildings to have survived for so long, and that 99% of the buildings of that time and age were probably flimsy and ugly, but are now completely invisible to us. Here is another example. You move to a new town, you see many successful restaurants in the area, and you come to the conclusion that if all these restaurants are successful, you could very well do the same. But what is invisible to you are all the restaurants that failed in the years prior. When you are only focusing on the winners, survivorship bias causes you to underestimate the challenge and overestimate your chances of success. Everywhere you look, there are successful actors and actresses. In reality, your chances are a fraction above zero of becoming successful. But no one is interested in all the failures, so the burial ground of all the failures is largely invisible to you. Society and the media only focuses on the winners. Try Googling actors that never made it, or people who failed in life after dropping out of college, and you won't have much luck finding anything useful. For every rock star, there are thousands of people in the cemetery of failure who never made it. For every startup business, there are thousands of failed startups. Everyone should chase their dreams, but don't let survivorship bias trick you into thinking the challenge is easier than it seems. Be careful of your overly optimistic beliefs that are caused by invisible failures. Self-serving bias and fundamental attribution error. You received an A on the test due to your hard work. However, you failed a test because the teacher is unfair and doesn't like you. For the CEO, all the great things that happened to the company that year were a direct result of his or her brilliant decisions. If the company has a bad year, the economy, interest rates, and government policies are to blame. According to the self-serving bias, our failures are due to external forces, but our successes are the result of our internal actions. For most people, the natural reaction to a negative outcome is to find an excuse for it and to blame others. To combat this, the first step is to simply become aware of this bias, try to practice humility, and always seek accountability and feedback on your strengths and weaknesses from others. Self-serving bias is also closely linked to fundamental attribution error. We judge others' behaviors on their personality or fundamental character, but we attribute our own behaviors to situational factors. If Simon is late to work, it's because he's a lazy person and doesn't take his job seriously. If you're late to work, however, it's the traffic and the weather's fault. Try to catch yourself in situations where you're judging someone else on their personality in a way that you would blame external factors in the same scenario. Hindsight bias. You have probably encountered people who are constantly saying, "I knew that was going to happen. I knew that stock was going to fall. I knew she was going to lose the election. I knew Jack and Mary were going to break up." They are always experts after the event has occurred. This is hindsight bias, otherwise known as the "I told you so" phenomenon. When we look at past events, everything seems clear and inevitable. Imagine you're a computer with a virus, the hindsight bias, that causes you to write over past information. As a result of this virus, you are unable to reconstruct previous states of knowledge. Every time your operating system updates to a new version of life, you lose a lot of your ability to recall in memory what you believed in the past. We think our memories are clear, but in reality we are poor at remembering the past accurately. The hindsight bias is a memory distorter. Memories of what you actually said or believed before the event are distorted to try and make your past opinions or beliefs more in line with what actually transpired. Here is an example. This is what you actually believed before an election. The results you observed get updated in your brain. The virus gets to work, and now when you go back to that memory, it has been distorted. And the memory distortion always distorts in your favor. This causes people to misremember things they said, their past opinions, and makes people overconfident in explaining all the reasons why something happened. The events leading up to World War II at the time on the ground probably looked something like this, but after the fact, with hindsight, people put it all into a neat sequence of events that people should have seen coming. Hindsight bias is especially harmful to decision makers, doctors, coaches, CEOs, and financial advisors. Because onlookers don't judge the person on the soundness of their decision making, but on whether the outcome was good or bad. We blame good decision making that led to a bad result, but we praise bad decision making that led to a good result. It is easy for us to blame when we know all the facts of what transpired. We oversimplify the past, when at the time there was doubt, uncertainty, or complexity. People tend to get down on themselves saying things like, "How could I be so stupid? I should have seen this coming," when actually they made sound judgments with the information that was available to them at the time. Don't worry, Mel, the mistake seems obvious now, but it is just hindsight. You could not have known in advance. "See, I told you this exact thing was going to happen." "Are you sure? I remember you saying something quite different." Availability bias. Johannesburg is safe. I know a guy who lives there and he's never had any problems with crime. Smoking isn't so bad. My uncle has smoked for 50 years and he's still alive. Humans are notoriously poor at thinking statistically, even when they are educated. We create a picture of the world using the examples that most easily come to mind. This is illogical, of course, and not in line with reality. We use statements like these to try and prove something, but they actually prove nothing at all. When we speak like this, we succumb to the availability bias. Plane crashes on the news are easy to recall. Safe flights are hard to recall. The availability bias can lead us to an irrational fear of flying. The shark attack story on the news last week, easy to recall. Safe swims at the ocean are hard to recall. The availability bias can lead us to have an irrational fear of being attacked by a shark. We estimate the likelihood of something happening by the information most readily available in our memory. Here is all the information. And here is the information most available to us, which could be something we saw recently, something in the news, or something extreme. Here is an example. Your chances of getting attacked by a shark in Australia are around 1 in 1 million. And let's imagine this is your perceived risk to that happening. You see a news story about a shark attack somewhere in Australia that you've never heard of. You hear a story about a shark attack in the same state that you live in. A friend of a cousin tells you his uncle was attacked by a shark just last week. Someone in your family was attacked by a shark yesterday. The closer you are in proximity to the available information, the higher you perceive the risk. The facts and statistics have remained the same, but the information most available to us changes how we make decisions. With availability bias, we go through life with an inaccurate risk map in our heads. We overestimate the chances of an airplane crash, a car accident, or a terrorist attack, and we underestimate the chances of dying from cancer or diabetes. Availability cascade. A local news story about a razor blade found in candy leads to mothers in the local community becoming worried, which leads to a news story about the mothers who are worried, which leads to a national story, which then leads to parents panicking and inspecting their children's candy, which eventually leads to homemade candy and cakes not being given to trick-or-treaters nationwide. This is an availability cascade, a self-sustaining chain of events which may start from media reports of a relatively minor event and lead up to mainstream public panic and/or large-scale government intervention. People begin to adopt the belief not because it's true or prevalent, but because it's popular. Put more simply, an availability cascade is an enormous overreaction to a minor problem. Whenever we encounter minor risks, we either ignore them completely or completely over-exaggerate them with nothing in between. A parent may know of this feeling waiting up at night for their teenage child to come home. They know that there is a 99% chance that everything is fine as usual, but having even a small thought that something may be wrong available in your mind sets off a self-sustaining chain of thoughts that grows into more thoughts about something disastrous having happened, which can eventually lead to panic and needing to immediately make contact and make sure that their child is okay. When you're watching the news, is it an objective piece of journalism or just an availability cascade? This is just an availability cascade, a non-event that is being inflated by the media until it fills our screens and there's public outcry. Sunk cost fallacy. You go to the cinema with your friend. After 25 minutes, you both realize the movie is awful. You turn to your friend and say, "This is terrible, let's get out of here." He replies, "Yeah, it is, but we spent a lot on these tickets. We can't just leave now." This is the sunk cost fallacy. You've spent the money either way if you stay or you go. Another example, maybe you have a girlfriend that is continually unfaithful, but you keep forgiving and accepting her back. You may say things to yourself like, "I've invested so much time, energy, and love into this woman, I can't just give up on her now." If you catch yourself saying things like, "I've come so far," or "I've spent so much on this stock, I can't sell it now," when the price is falling, you are probably encountering the sunk cost fallacy. The sunk cost fallacy can especially plague investors' decision-making in the stock market. To be more rational, look at the current status and forecast of the stock or relationship, and don't put too much weight into the past investments of money, time, energy, or love. The framing effect. Which meat would you like to buy? 99% fat-free or 1% fat? Most people when asked go for option A, even though they're exactly the same. How about now? 98% fat-free or 1% fat? Most people still go for option A. This is the framing effect. We often draw different conclusions from the same information depending on how it's presented. Be on the lookout for how different news outlets frame their headlines and stories, and how companies frame their offers. Here we have a small-sized popcorn for $3 and a large for $7. Which would you choose? In this case, a higher percentage are inclined to go for the cheaper alternative. Now let me introduce the third option, a medium size for $6.50. Studies show that when given these three options, a much higher percentage will choose the large because they see this as the most valuable option. The small and the large prices are exactly the same, but the decoy changes your perception and influences your decision-making towards the more expensive option. When The Economist magazine gave readers these two options, they were quite disappointed with the results. Most opted for the cheaper option. When they introduced a third decoy option, they skyrocketed their sales by 43%. The offer was exactly the same, but the print and web offer now appeared much more valuable. The bills are overdue. Honey, would you mind paying the bills? It's not what you say, but how you frame it. Would you like to pay by cash or credit card? If the sign showed a cash discount of 5%, people wouldn't feel that bad about missing out on the discount for the convenience of using their credit card. If, however, the sign showed a credit card surcharge of 5%, people would be inclined to avoid the fee. On closer inspection, though, they're exactly the same thing. There is a 90% chance you will survive this operation. There is a 10% chance you will die from this operation. Same outcome, different frames. The words we use affect the emotions we have towards making certain decisions. The clustering illusion. Have you ever seen faces in the clouds, Jesus on toast, or faces on the rock formations of Mars? The human brain is always seeking patterns and rules in everything. For the most part, the clustering illusion is harmless, but it does have some real-world implications. Investors who rely on technical analysis of charts have an uncanny ability to derive all kinds of patterns and predictions from the data. They often sense patterns and make risky investments where none ever existed. Take a moment to observe this string of X's and O's. Is the sequence random or planned? Even though they are completely random, people when asked will often come up with all sorts of laws or rules to explain the patterns of the letters. To overcome your sensitivity to pattern recognition, try to regain your skepticism. If you find a pattern, ask yourself if it is more likely to be pure chance, or am I falling for the clustering illusion? Exponential growth. If you fold a piece of paper in half and then in half again, and continue to do that 50 times, how thick would it be after 50 folds? If you guessed a few inches thick, you would be slightly off, because the paper would be so thick it could nearly reach the sun. Linear growth is intuitive to us. Exponential growth, however, is incomprehensible to us. But why is that so? Simply put, it wasn't needed before. Our ancestors mainly had linear experiences. Let's take a look at this hypothetical country. The inflation rate of this country is 5%. Intuitively, if we're being honest, we have no real idea what that even means. Only 5%, some people may remark. That isn't so bad. If instead I told you in 14 years your money will be worth half what it is today, you can understand that without much thought, and it may actually give you some reason to worry. The greatest shortcoming of the human race is our inability to understand the exponential function. Al Bartlett. The power of compounding is the most powerful force in the universe. Albert Einstein. To illustrate the power of exponential growth, if we place 1 grain of rice on the first square of this chessboard, 2 grains on the second square, 4 grains on the third square, and so on, doubling the number of grains on each subsequent square, how many grains of rice would we need to accomplish this task? In the short term, exponential growth isn't that impressive, but the growth that occurs at a faster and faster rate over a long term is truly amazing and can quickly become astronomical and incomprehensible. To complete the task, you would need 18 quintillion grains of rice, which is a number that we can't even begin to wrap our heads around, and illustrates how quickly a small amount of something can grow when it is subject to the power of exponential growth. When thinking about exponential growth, if you want to approximate the time it would take any process to double, or you need a way to describe something that is more intuitive, use the rule of 70. 10% returns on investment, your money will be worth double that in approximately 7 years. 8% inflation, your money is worth half what it is today in approximately 8.7 years. If a country has a 5% population growth, the country will have double the population in approximately 14 years. Of course, these growth rates would need to remain constant, and the world is full of uncertainties and complexities. However, these are much more intuitive than just saying the current inflation rate is X%. Be careful with exponential growth. Never trust your intuition about exponential growth rates, because we don't have any. Where possible, try to convert the growth rate into something more intuitive and linear with a time frame. Barnum effect. For you, the viewer, you may find it surprising that I know you. You have a great need for other people to like and admire you. At times, you have serious doubts as to whether you made the right decision. You pride yourself as an independent thinker. At times, you're extroverted, affable, and sociable, while at other times you're introverted, wary, and reserved. So was I close at describing your personality? Bertrand Forer in 1948 conducted an experiment whereby people were given the same text of generalized statements found in astrology magazines. He then told each participant that he had personally written the statement just for them. 86% found that the text was an accurate description of their personality. This is the Barnum effect. When we easily attribute our personalities to vague and generalized statements, even if they can apply to a wide range of people. The next time you remark, "Oh my god, that is so me," when reading your horoscope or doing an online quiz on what type of spirit animal you are, just remember that people are easily fooled by horoscopes, palm reading, and psychics due to the Barnum effect.